This man won $30 million but decided to hide it from his wife and child. Think that's crazy? Well, it's not the first time this has happened. Before we introduce you to him, here are a few more short stories of lottery winners who did the same thing. Californian Denise Rossi hit the jackpot back in 1996. She was already 49 years old at the time, and she was suddenly a millionaire. She'd won an incredible $1.3 million. Now, with her new fortune in hand, she had to decide what to do with her wealth. But it wasn't a tough decision for her. She already knew what she wanted. And no, it wasn't a new Ferrari or a big mansion near the sea. It was a divorce. Denise had been married to Thomas Rossi for an incredible 25 years already. But she wasn't about to let him get his hands on any of the cash. She went home knowing she was a millionaire, and the first thing she did was to tell her husband to move out of the house. The sooner, the better. Thomas was totally blindsided. Denise had never said anything like that before, and he didn't understand why she was suddenly so insistent that he get out of her life. He was totally confused. Behind his back, Denise had opted to take the annuity payments, and she asked the lottery to send her first winner's check to her mom's address. She'd told them that it needed to be sent to her mom because she was getting divorced. Only that wasn't true, at least not yet. It was only after she'd won that she went to see a divorce lawyer. She didn't mention her lottery win at the time, but just 11 days after her big win, Thomas received divorce papers. Now, Thomas wasn't only confused about being asked to get out of the house, he was suddenly being asked for a divorce he never expected. As if that wasn't bad enough, he received those papers just 3 days after Christmas. That's right, all these things were happening to him over the holidays, when he was meant to be celebrating. It could have been the best Christmas of his life if she just told him they were millionaires. But Thomas must have blamed himself. Why would she do this? He must have done something stupid and made her angry. In fact, he had no idea why all this had happened until years later, and he never would have known if he hadn't received a letter in the mail by mistake. The letter had shown up in his mailbox, but it was addressed to his now ex-wife, Denise. When he opened it, the letter was from a company and explained that they had helped hundreds of lottery winners like you around the country receive a lump sum payment for the present value of their future annual lottery payments. That sounded pretty suspicious. Why was the company offering to pay out lottery winnings to Denise? Unless she'd won the lottery. Thomas realized that she must have won the lottery while they were still living together. Otherwise, the letter never would have been sent to his house. Suddenly, her insistence on a quick divorce made sense to Thomas. She just wanted to get rid of him so she could keep the money to herself. Thomas decided he better contact a lawyer. It wasn't long before Denise and Thomas were together again, but this time it was in court. It had only taken Thomas a few days to secure an injunction with the letter he'd received. But what did all this mean for Denise? Well, she insisted in court that she hadn't asked for the divorce just to keep the money all to herself. Instead, she said she'd wanted to get out of the relationship for years. That might be true. She could have felt like she suddenly had the financial stability she needed to leave. But we doubt it. And the judge sure didn't believe her either. He ruled that she had violated something called laws of disclosure. Basically, that means that if you're married, you're legally required to tell them if you suddenly receive some unexpected cash, especially if it's a huge lottery win. The judge also said that he believed Denise had acted in fraud or malice. Basically, he thought Denise had intentionally hidden the money because she was being cruel. She just didn't want Thomas to share her joy. We'll never know for sure, but if that was true, then she totally deserved what happened to her next. Denise was ordered by the judge to give Thomas 20 yearly payments of an eye-watering $66,800. In other words, she'd be paying out the entire total of her $1.3 million win to Thomas over the next 20 years. And it was totally her own fault. Her lawyer said that if she'd just been honest with Thomas, she could have kept all the money to herself. If she'd told Thomas the money existed, but then still divorced him or wanted to keep all the money, her lawyer believes he could have argued that the jackpot was Denise's separate property. And yes, you're allowed to keep some stuff to yourself even if you're married. You just have to mention that you have it. Even if it hadn't worked out totally her way, they would have told her to share some of the cash. But she would have been able to keep at least some of it. But now she's lost every cent she won because she lied. And that's not the only time someone was guilty of hiding their win. To find out who else was punished for hiding a lottery win, we need to head over to China for the first time. The lucky winner has been identified only as Zhou. Zhou became one of the luckiest people in China when he won a whopping 10 million yuan. In case you're wondering, that's just under $1.4 million. That's a lot of cash that could have totally changed the lives of his family, if he'd told them, but he didn't. And if you're thinking this is just like what Denise did, you're wrong. In a way, it's even worse. Zhou didn't tell his wife, Lin, about the win, but he did tell other people. After taxes, Zhou still had an impressive 8.43 million yuan, or about $1.16 million. That's more than enough cash to share with your wife. But Zhou decided he'd rather share it with everyone except her. In front of Lin, Zhou continued living his life as if nothing had happened, but secretly, he was transferring huge lumps of cash to other people. His sister was the first to receive a portion of the win. Zhou gave her over 275 grand for nothing at all. But even worse, he'd also sent almost $100,000 to his ex-wife. Imagine you find out your spouse is sending money to his ex without even telling you that there was any money in the first place. He later said that he'd sent her the money to help her buy a flat. But to give her money without even taking his current wife to dinner is pretty bad. You won't be surprised to hear the next bit of the story. Lin found out what Zhou had done and immediately filed for divorce. I bet that's what most people would do. As part of the divorce, she requested just under $400,000 of the lottery win that Zhou had hidden from her. But she also asked for half of the property they shared together. That sounds pretty reasonable. But that was when she discovered something else that Zhou had done behind her back. See, Zhou had chosen to transfer that money to his sister and ex-wife, but he hadn't exactly wanted to take it straight from his lottery winnings. So instead, he decided to claim it from the property he owned with his wife. That's a bigger crime than the one Denise committed when she hid her lottery winnings. Taking money from their property and then taking steps to hide what he'd done was a form of embezzlement. Obviously, when judges made their ruling, they were not on Zhou's side. Who would be? They ordered him to pay up to 2/3 of his lottery winnings to Lin and granted her request for a divorce. Now he has no money and no wife. You've gotta wonder what he thought was gonna happen, because we predicted that ending from the start. Zhou seemed to have no reason to want to hide his jackpot from his wife. But one anonymous winner has told a story of how she kept her win a secret from her significant other because of his terrible spending habits. Back in 2014, this winner, who we'll call Lucy, took home an impressive 480,000 British pounds. That's over 600,000 USD. Sure, it's not the biggest jackpot ever, but it can make a huge difference, especially because the win happened just 2 months before her wedding day. Normally, anyone would be excited by this great start to their new life. But Lucy panicked. She was worried that her happy life was about to be turned upside down by the money. Even worse, she knew her fiancé was a reckless spender. She didn't want to miss out on using her new money wisely. But then she realized something important. Can you guess what it is? We already mentioned it. She had her big win 2 months before her wedding. That meant legally she didn't need to tell her husband because she hadn't received the money while in the marriage. She was still technically, or at least legally, single when she got the money, so she just didn't say anything. Well, not to her family. The one person she did tell was a financial advisor. She put the money into a separate bank account and started using her advisor to help her invest in businesses and property. It was a super smart idea. Soon, her bank account had grown to twice the size, and she now had more than $1 million in her secret bank account. Only there was one problem. She didn't know it, but her time was running out. 8 years into their marriage, Lucy's husband spotted a text message on her phone celebrating her hitting $1 million. Obviously, he was shocked. How could she have $1 million he'd never heard of? There was nothing she could do. She had to own up to the lie. So she sat him down and explained. After that, he walked out. He stayed with a friend that night. But I bet you can't guess how this story ends. He came back. Even more amazing is he agreed with Lucy that he would have blown the cash on stupid stuff. And really, he was glad she'd used it more wisely. Sure, he was a little mad that she'd hidden it from him, but he figured her motivations made enough sense to forgive her. He told her later that he didn't want this to get in the way of their marriage. After all, he still loved her. That story literally couldn't have ended better. But how will the next one end? Finally, let's meet the winner of the ginormous $30 million jackpot we mentioned. Mr. Lee's lottery story is pretty weird right from the start. The resident of southern China claimed he's been playing the lottery for a whopping 10 years. He says it's just a fun hobby for him that provides a little ray of hope in his life, but his family never cared that he played the lottery. Maybe that's because they never expected him to win much. After all, even though he'd been buying tickets for all those years, he'd only ever won small amounts. He also said he only ever plays when he has extra money, and even then he doesn't spend much on lottery tickets. If it's true that he never spent much money on lottery tickets, then we have no idea how many tickets he bought over the years. But we do know one interesting detail. He changed strategies. When he first started playing, he would choose a new number for every ticket. But recently, he changed his tactic and started using the same numbers every time. The numbers he chose were special to him, but he never explained why. Either way, this little piece of information explains the next weird fact about Mr. Lee's win. He actually won 40 times. He'd bought 40 tickets for the draw and used the same set of numbers for all of them. In case you're curious about what these lucky numbers were, we have that information for you. He'd picked the numbers 2, 15, 19, 26, 27, 29, and 2 again for this lottery's version of the Powerball or Mega Ball. You might want to try out these numbers yourself, but you should know that experts say you should choose at least one number higher than 31 to help you avoid having to share your jackpot if you do win. Why? Well, it makes you different from most people who use birthday or anniversary numbers that obviously only go up to the 31 days in a month. But back to the story. Normally, you'd think it's pretty crazy to use the same numbers on 40 tickets all for the same draw. But this time, it was a genius strategy. It meant that he won a prize on all 40 of the tickets. This win worked more like a lower tier prize, which means the prize is fixed. It's different to if he'd won a Powerball jackpot on all 40 tickets. That would just mean he has to share the prize with himself 40 times, and it wouldn't make any difference to how much money he took home. For this huge win, all 40 tickets won a fixed prize of 5.48 million yuan. Times that by 40, and he went home with a whopping total of 219 million yuan. That's about 30 million US dollars. There's no doubt that's a huge jackpot. Just like in the US, lottery winners in China are also taxed on their winnings. After his tax was deducted, he still had an incredible 171.6 million yuan to collect, or about $23.6 million. But first, he had to collect the cash from the lottery office in Nanning, a city in the Guangxi region of southern China. He jumped in the car and booked himself into a hotel for the night in preparation for the big day. Then, he just sat there. He said he was too afraid to leave the hotel room in case he somehow lost the winning tickets. We can't blame him. 40 winning lottery tickets has got to be a terrifying responsibility to carry around with you. In any case, he made it. But the photograph of him receiving his giant check is a little confusing. That yellow cartoon guy is not the lottery's mascot or something. That's Mr. Lee. You're probably wondering why he chose to collect his check in that costume. Well, there's a good answer. In China, you're required by law to attend the winner's press conference in person as publicity for the lottery, or they will not pay out your prize. That's the same as some American states. But a loophole in the Chinese law means that you technically don't have to show your actual face. That means a lot of lottery winners in China will show up to the press conference dressed in mascot costumes to protect their privacy and help them stay anonymous. It's smart, and it means we get to see some pretty funny photos. But Mr. Lee may have had another reason for wanting to hide his face. He didn't want his own family to know about his big win. Crazy, right? Most lottery winners only protect their privacy so strangers don't show up at their house asking for money. They're happy to go home and celebrate their huge win with their family. But what's the point of winning it all if you can't have a bit of fun with your loved ones? But Mr. Lee had other ideas. He said he would not tell his family about his new millions because he worries they'll become lazy and stop working hard if they know he's rich. Right. We agree that lottery winners should be allowed to do whatever they want with their riches. But what's the point of winning all that money if it doesn't help you to stop working so hard? The money should help you to have a more fulfilling life, right? And shouldn't that include your family? We'll leave you to decide. But there's one more thing. The first thing that Mr. Lee did with his money was he gave it away. That's right, he handed over 5 million yuan, or about $700,000 to charity. Don't get me wrong, it's great to share with charities. But if you were Mr. Lee's son or wife and you hadn't seen $1 of that big win, finding out that he'd given so much to charity is bound to hurt, right? We don't know how this story will end yet, but we've seen from other lottery winners who hid their money that it normally ends with a broken relationship and maybe even a criminal conviction. Do you think these are the most shocking lottery stories ever? Think again. Check out our list of the 10 most shocking things that ever happened to lottery winners.